So it is the morning after, and 49ers stock up, stock down is what we're going to call it. We've done this every year. We're going to continue it this time through. 49ers played the Raiders yesterday. They were drubbed, but obviously we don't care all too much about the final score as it was week one of the preseason. This is about individual analysis with the cut down to the 53-man roster and the 16-man practice squad at the end of this month being the focal point. We have to evaluate players at every single 49ers position. So this goes from Trey Lance to A.J. Parker, one of the defensive backs who really impressed yesterday. We have to evaluate those players individually to see how they fit within the 49ers 53-man roster projection. Those of you who haven't seen it yet, this is the piece that I wrote from Allegiant Stadium last week. As you can tell, I'm still in Vegas, going to fly back to the Bay Area today. I'm anticipating that the 49ers will have practice on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday this week. Walk through on Friday, and then they play the Broncos on Saturday. But this I wrote here from Vegas, from the desert, the 49ers' dubious debut, Trey Lance, Jake Moody among those to falter in the blowout loss. The link to this article on The Athletic, $2 a month right now, is in the comments section and in the description. So go ahead and check that out. Sign up because we're going to have the most in-depth 49ers coverage that you'll find anywhere. But for stock up and stock down, we're going to need to visualize the 49ers 90-man roster and the 53-man depth chart projection. Both of those are on this sheet right here. I'm going to copy and paste this link. I'm going to drop this into the chat section for you. Why don't you follow along while we take care of this show? So we're going to go through this title by title, and we'll start with the quarterback position, and we'll probably return to the quarterback position because that seems to be the majority of what people want to hear about. But I like to talk about everything on this roster. I think to be honest, some of the quarterback fixation is a little bit ridiculous, but also have to give the people what they want. Those of you coming here, though, you're going to learn about the entire 49ers roster. Anyway, this is how I'm going to do it. Stock up on the bottom of the screen. Sam Darnold and Brandon Allen, stock up. Trey Lance, the stock is down. I think this is self-explanatory. Trey Lance was not good yesterday, but I think there are caveats to that, and I do think he's going to look a whole lot better next week against the Denver Broncos. But we can start with the good, and that is that Sam Darnold came into this game and was solid. I mean, everybody's going to talk about the pass to Ronnie Bell, perfectly placed go ball, had another good third down out pattern to Tay Martin. I thought one of Darnold's most impressive plays was a throwaway. I mean, it looked like he was dead to rights on a free rusher, and he was able to spin away from him and sprint away to the far side, turn around, throw the ball away. Sometimes it's the plays that don't show up in the stat sheet that are actually the most significant ones. That was only an incompletion technically, but the fact that it wasn't a sack allowed the 49ers to continue their drive. And the fact that it wasn't a sack showed that Sam Darnold is a quarterback who's got a decent floor, right? I mean, I think in Kyle Shanahan's system, it's been demonstrated through practice and now through this first game that they can trust Sam Darnold to be at a reasonably high floor, to not make these massively negative plays, to be a QB2. I mean, that's what he showed yesterday. That's what he has to continue showing throughout the rest of this preseason. But the outing yesterday, that throwaway that I talk about, the ability to flush out of the pocket, the ability to make a couple nice third down throws, obviously the go ball, that might even be a little bit more icing on the cake. I think that there is something to work with Sam Darnold. There definitely is a nice floor to work with Brandon Allen. I know Darnold's had the interception issues in his career with the Jets and the Panthers. Brandon Allen really hasn't. Brandon Allen's been a number 2 in Cincinnati behind Joe Burrow prior to the stop with the 49ers, and he showed more of that capability yesterday as the 49ers' third quarterback. Tay Martin couldn't get both feet in bounds on one of those deep corner, deep out plays. It's still a nice throw from Brandon Allen. Brandon Allen still hung in there against some pressure to make a nice throw downfield. I mean, he would have been 6 of 8 without an interception had Ronnie Bell held on to a perfect pass a little bit later in his outing. So Brandon Allen, if you're looking for a quarterback high floor for a QB2, QB3, and the 49ers want to cultivate as much option power as possible at that QB position, Brandon Allen did that job for them yesterday. So it was a good step in the right direction for him. He took a red-eye flight from the West Coast last night all the way to Palm Beach to Florida to be with his wife, who's expecting a child at any time right now, Monday, Tuesday. I think Brandon said in the locker room that he expects to be back for the 49ers practice on Thursday. So stock up for two of the 49ers quarterbacks. And I mean, we talked about this so much. There's no way we can say that Trey Lance's stock was up after yesterday's performance. Was skittish in the pocket, did not look comfortable early on. I've talked for years now about Trey Lance's shortcomings with quick passes, with short passes. Those have to become more consistent for him. That has to become a bigger staple of his game. It's no surprise that Lance had a good 3-4 throw stretch on a non-2-minute drive after he notched a couple of those easy completions in rhythm. Because after that is when he found Willie Snead on the rollout, the play where he almost crossed the line of scrimmage, the throw back across the middle of the field. It was a little flip throw. That was right before the lucky touchdown, but it was a nice little 3-throw stretch for Trey Lance, and it started with him hitting the gimmies. He's got to hit the gimmies, and it's not just, oh, look, he hit a gimme there, he's fine. He's got to consistently do it, because if you don't consistently do it, then that one that you don't hit is the one that's going to get the offense off schedule. Even the early one to Dwelly that Trey Lance did hit, I think it was second down of the first drive, could have probably yielded a little bit more yardage if it was put perfectly into a spot where Ross Dwelly could run with it in stride. So it's really important to master the short game. Trey Lance has to keep doing that. Now, there are people that are just beating the crap out of Trey Lance online. I don't think that's fully fair right now. I think that you have to look at this in context. The guy has 4 career starts. He was exceptionally raw coming out of North Dakota State. So we knew that he was going to be behind schedule to begin. And the fact that he suffered a broken finger in 2021 that inhibited him from throwing properly for a full year, and then suffered the broken ankle last year, which kept him out of the whole season. The fact that those two things happened on top of the fact that he came out of college as an exceptionally raw prospect have simply stalled Trey Lance's development. And now he's coming off of an injury, so of course there was going to be some rust yesterday. The one thing that Trey Lance clearly needs after we saw the outing yesterday with a few nice intermediate throws, right, and a nice escape out of the pocket from one free rusher, the one thing that Trey Lance really, really needs is time. He badly needs time to develop. The problem is the 49ers aren't in a position to really give it to him, and they cannot and should not give it to him in the fashion that they gave it to him in 2021 and 2022. Why not? Because Brock Purdy has emerged while Trey Lance has been injured. And that's just how the NFL works. It's a dog-eat-dog world. If you've been hurt for 2 straight years, you're going to lose standing in the National Football League. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how much they invested in you. Those 2 seasons have passed. The 49ers are dealing with a new reality, and Trey Lance has to make the most out of the limited opportunities that he's going to get now in the preseason, and there are 2 more games in the preseason, to show the 49ers that he can raise his floor to be at a level that they're comfortable with at the backup quarterback position. So Darnold and Allen's stock is up. Lance stock is down. We enter a new week. Trey Lance has to show more steadiness this next week. And no reason to get emotional about it, and no reason to cry about it. That's the situation that the 49ers are in right now. A lot of people are treating this very stark reality very toxically right now, right? There's a lot of toxic conversation surrounding this. That doesn't have to be. We can acknowledge that Trey Lance needs more time to develop. We can acknowledge that the 49ers are in a tough spot as far as giving it to him because Brock Purdy has emerged. And we can also acknowledge that Lance should look better next week against Denver because he still has not had a chance in his NFL career to string together game time, playing time over a longer stretch of time. So his longest chance to stretch something together in game action is going to be this preseason. 1 game under his belt against the Raiders. Didn't go particularly well. Game 2's coming up against the Broncos next week. It needs to go better. Game 3 against the Chargers should go better than that. If it doesn't, well, I mean, the 49ers will make decisions at the cut-down deadline. Who do you trade? What are you offered? Who do you cut? I mean, they have to decide what to do by the end of August. There's still time before then. So why don't we just let this all play out organically? The quarterback situation was always going to play out organically for the 49ers. All right, more stock up, stock down. I thought that the running back room was constant. I didn't notice anybody separate themselves or lose any ground in the running back room. To me, it was interesting that Kalon LeBourne didn't play for the 49ers. Hardly got any run for the 49ers. Maybe they've already seen enough from him to be okay, we're okay with this guy on the practice squad, and they don't want to showcase him at the running back room. But anyway, between Ty Davis-Price and Jordan Mason, Jeremy McNichols, I thought that it was about neutral yesterday, so I don't have a stock up, stock down in the running back room. I do, however, have some stock ups in the tight end room. Troy Fumagalli, the veteran who spent a lot of last season on the 49ers practice squad, he was solid over 2 catches, including one there on the 2-minute drill where there was some yards after the catch. Good blocking yesterday, too, from Troy Fumagalli. I mean, when you look at my stock down, and that's the rookie Cameron Latu, who finally was able to hold on to a football. He even dropped one in warmups. I mean, drops have been an issue. Right after he held on to a football, he fumbled. I mean, Latu, this is a tenuous situation. I get that he's swimming in the playbook, but he's unreliable out there for the 49ers. And if this persists, it's going to be a big, big issue as the cut down nears in late August. Fumagalli was the opposite of unreliable. Granted, a smaller sample, Fumagalli was dependable yesterday. Ross Dwelly was dependable yesterday. You had 2 dependable tight ends. I think Braden Willis played very late in the game. He also, to me, was dependable in his limited action. But the story of Cam Latu so far has been he's not dependable. He's dropped like 5-6 passes over the course of training camp. The fumble yesterday was bad. Now, it's still too early to talk about the cuts, right? It still is too early. But we can say that if Latu does not become more dependable with the bread and butter, with the basic stuff, which is holding onto the football when it's coming to you on a pass and then holding onto it after you've caught it, the 49ers might have some tough decisions to make. Let's just put it that way. And when guys like Dwelly and Fumagalli are dependable, you have to, especially with a Super Bowl caliber roster, you have to go with dependability at the margin. So Cam Latu has a lot to show here over the course of the next few weeks. Offensive line. All right, this was interesting, and I could pop this open on the screen because the 49ers have some pressure numbers now out on Pro Football Focus. And this is always a nice objective way of looking how the team is doing up front. Obviously, we have to put context onto it. You can't just look at numbers. But I think that looking at the numbers is a good starting point to pair with the tape. And I've watched the tape already, and I'll give you the numbers right now. So these are pressures allowed, and then in parentheses, you're going to have the pass blocking opportunities. So the number of pass blocking reps for each player. So, for example, although Nick Zakelj, the 49ers' second-year guard, allowed 4 pressures, I think Jalen Moore's outing, at least by the numbers, was worse because he allowed 3 in 12 reps, and Zakelj's 4 pressures allowed came over 28 snaps yesterday. Neither Zakelj nor Moore was good. And I think this should illustrate that the majority of the 49ers O-line problems came from those 2 players. Very first snap of this football game, Nick Zakelj got backed into Trey Lance. Now, everybody's going to be like, was that Trey's fault? Was that the offensive line's fault? I say both. It was a 3-step drop. On a 3-step drop, the ball has to come out. It's a 3-step drop. So especially if you have an offensive line that specializes in outside zone blocking, those guys up front are a little bit lighter. Their focus is movement. If your quarterback is only dropping 3 steps and one of the guards is getting bull rushed, that guard may end up in the quarterback's lap sooner rather than later. And this is something Trey Lance needs to realize. Now, Nick Zakelj needs to be better at not getting backed into the QB, of course. But at a certain point, the QB has to realize, this guard's going to be in my lap. It's a 3-step drop. I need to get rid of the football. So that's a sack that's on Lance and it's on Nick Zakelj. It could be on both guys. It's a team sport, right? So you assign blame to multiple spots. Anyway, that was one of the pressures that Zakelj gave up in his 28 snaps. There was one really unfortunate sack, and Trey Lance took 4 of those, where we saw Matt Pryor, the right tackle, get beat. We saw Jalen Moore, the left tackle, get beat. And we saw Nick Zakelj, the guard, get beat. All 3 of them got beat on one snap. And yeah, on a play like that, Trey Lance doesn't have much of a chance to do anything. If it's only one guy getting beat, typically the quarterback should be able to mitigate some of that pressure. Obviously, we saw Jimmy Garoppolo do such a good job of that over the years for the 49ers. Brock Purdy did a good job of that last year for the 49ers. When it's multiple guys, and that did happen sometime for Trey Lance yesterday, it's going to be hard for that quarterback to operate. So, I'll say that Lance did not have great protection in front of him. Lance also played a poor game. Those 2 things can be true simultaneously. I will say that Leroy Watson and Jason Poe both impressed me on the rewatch. 24 snaps for Watson in pass protection, 28 for Jason Poe, the guard in pass protection, only 2 pressures given up between them. Jason Poe was rigid with his anchor yesterday. Go put on the tape. I thought that he was good with his anchor. The strength is not an issue. Center of gravity is not an issue for Jason Poe. It's the height and the lack thereof, right? So he got beat with a rip move around him once because when you don't have that height, it's a little bit harder to get in front of people. But, I mean, he fights. The 49ers loved the heart and the tenacity last year. I think he's making strides. I don't think it's out of the question that you could do other stuff on this roster, too, if they run a specialty play. I mean, he did play fullback back in college, and he did execute some of those fullback plays on that impressive tape last year. So Jason Poe, to me, is another guy who's targeted for that 49ers practice squad and can still be a contributor downstream. Leroy Watson, though, this is really intriguing because I say that Jalen Moore's stock is down, 3 pressures allowed in those 12 snaps. Matt Pryor, he only allowed 1 pressure. You could see here, it was the sack that he gave up. But the issue with Pryor is that we have yet to see him play left tackle. And to be swing tackle, you got to do both. So they're saying they're going to try to work him in on the left side after these practices. He is a veteran, so he has that work into his advantage, has, 28 career starts. But Leroy Watson, who played a little bit later on yesterday, if he's got quick feet, he's that tight end conversion from last year. I mean, he has a lot more upside than somebody like Matt Pryor. Now, of course, for swing tackle, you're going to go with floor and not upside, right? It's going to be a more heavy floor equation here. But, along those lines, speaking of floor, Leroy Watson played both left and right tackle yesterday. Matt Pryor has only played on the right side, and they're going to try to mix him in on the left side, but the 49ers have already acknowledged this guy's more comfortable on the right. So obviously there's a little bit of an issue that they're going to have to conquer moving him to the left. So if Leroy keeps on delivering how he delivered yesterday on both sides, and he keeps on growing the way that he has over the past year, adding the 20 to 30 pounds to move from tight end to offensive line, he might be a preferred option over somebody like Matt Pryor. And I mean, we look at Jalen Moore yesterday. He was coming off the bone bruise, the injury. It seems that Jalen got the first look at that swing tackle job, but I mean, it was a rough outing for him. So to me, this is fascinating. This is alarming. And this is intriguing at the same time, right? Leroy Watson's the intriguing component. Jalen Moore's play, to me, it's alarming. Matt Pryor's lack of versatility, that's alarming because you only have so many roster spots and you need the swing tackle to play on both sides. And, it's also intriguing because, as we'll talk about elsewhere, the 49ers have surpluses at other positions. There's a chance the swing tackle for this 2023 season is not on the roster yet. And with some of the issues the 49ers saw along their offensive line yesterday, I think it lends credence to that possibility moving forward. All right, let's go to the defensive line. And, the D-line, there wasn't much of anything generated as far as pass rush production yesterday. Cleveland Farrell had the nice move to beat left tackle, the little swim, a little rip. He got straight back there. It was a sack for the 49ers. Outside of that, Gary Hyder Jr. had the other pressure. That was it. 2 pressures for the 49ers. Now, they didn't play any of their starters. And a lot of people are going to be like, why isn't Javon Kinlaw on this list? I think Javon Kinlaw's performance was a wash yesterday. I didn't think he did anything atrociously bad. I don't think he did anything great. I'm not going to say it was stock up. I'm not going to say it was stock down. For one, I think Kinlaw and Givens is a great example of this because Givens has played a lot more than Kinlaw at the NFL level, hasn't been hurt nearly as much. Those are guys that you're going to evaluate best when Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, Drake Jackson, all these players are on the field with them. Because the 49ers are not treating Kinlaw as if he's their number 1 defensive lineman. I mean, they might have hoped that he would be at least the number 1 defensive tackle at some point when they drafted him back in 2020. But again, just like is the case of Trey Lance, you recalibrate your expectations for the player based on the truth of the moment. And the truth of the moment is that the 49ers have already moved on from thinking that Kinlaw is some kind of 1A defensive tackle to recognizing him as a rotational piece. Whatever they get is found money at this point. Javon Hargrave is their big money DT. He's going to play 3 techniques, going to play the 2I. He's going to be that force on the inside. So how is Kinlaw going to do in a rotation alongside guys like Hargrave and Bosa and Eric Armstead? How's he going to perform? How's Kevin Givens going to perform when they get a crack at an opposing offensive line that's worn down by superstars? We didn't get to see that yesterday. Yeah, I saw Kevin Givens get eaten alive by a double team. Yeah, I saw Javon Kinlaw struggle at times to get some push, although I did see one nice run stop where he was able to utilize some of his leverage. I think Zamir White was the running back on the play. But given not going to face a whole lot of double teams in the regular season, I think the idea is that Kinlaw won't face as many double teams in the regular season because you got guys like Hargrave. You've got guys like Bosa who will be on his way. I don't think you have to worry about that. So when that's the case, it's hard to evaluate players like that and give them a stock up, stock down unless they do something crazy good or crazy bad in a preseason game. That being said, I thought Clelin Ferrell, that was a nice pass rush move. He won one-on-one. You got to tip your cap to him. It wasn't against the starter, but let's give Clelin Ferrell credit where it's due. That was a sack against his former team. And the reason I put Breeland Speaks up there is because the 49ers signed Breeland on Thursday. He's wearing number 66. Their equipment staff isn't even in town, right? Or they're not in town with the stitcher to be able to put the names on the back of the jersey. So Breeland Speaks is playing without the name on the back of his jersey, at least in practice. I'm not sure if he didn't have his name at the game. And he played 22 snaps. So this guy shows up off the street on Thursday and is playing 22 snaps by Sunday. To me, that speaks volumes. To me, that says the 49ers really like this guy and they want to give him an opportunity. And he was out there, and I'll say that his stock went up. As far as Spencer Wege went, this is a rookie who I talked about a week ago as somebody who was making some moves upward in practice. I mean, he was flashing. He was making some plays. Defensive end from North Dakota State. That's Trey Lance's school that had converted to defensive tackle. But I don't think that Wege did much of anything yesterday. And right now, if they had a cut down today, the roster is so crowded, and we can go here to illustrate this situation. The roster is so crowded that I just don't think they'd be able to fit Spencer Wege in. I think he's a good practice squad candidate for right now. But if you notice my defensive line room on the 53-man projection, and I highlighted right there, I only have them taking 9 D linemen right now. Every single one of these D linemen that makes the team is going to have to prove it. Kerry Hyder's stock probably up. I mean, Hyder's a stable commodity. We know exactly what they're going to get from Kerry Hyder, which is a versatile depth piece. So I have him making the team. I have Austin Bryant, Farrell making the team. Obviously, you got Givens and Kinlaw. Then you got your starting 4 over here. But in the case of Spencer Wege, he's going to have to force his way on to the 53-man roster. He's going to have to kick the door down because it's just too crowded for the 49ers to justify carrying a player just because they did a few nice things in training camp. Again, you're going to have to kick the door down, and I don't think that we saw anything from Taco Charlton or Spencer Wege in yesterday's game action to make that the case. Now, obviously, Breeland Speaks is somebody whose stock is up, but I wouldn't go as far as to say, oh, he's going to make the 53-man roster. Let's move over to linebacker. So linebacker, this is going to be tricky for me. And I think the 49ers might run a roster maneuver ultimately to be able to make sure that both Jalen Graham and D. Winters, highlighted here, make it. Both of these guys, to me, played well yesterday. Jalen Graham led the team with 6 stops. They're Sincere McCormick, great name. Raiders have a lot of guys with cool names. They have Sincere McCormick. They have Divine Diablo. You got to like both of those names. Aiden McConnell's a pretty cool name for a QB too, but you can't beat Divine Diablo and Sincere McCormick. Anyway, Jalen Graham had he's playing Mike, and he just bolted to the sideline on an outside run from Sincere McCormick and got there before McCormick can turn the corner. It was one of those hunter kind of plays, right? You're hunting that running back. Jair Brown also had a play at the corner pylon that was super impressive to me. That was against Zamir White, right? Yeah, that was early on. That was the play right before the touchdown from Zamir White, where you saw Jair Brown hunt the running back coming from the secondary, playing downhill from the second level, and just kind of torpedoing in and making the stop. So I thought Jalen Graham had one of those. I mean, Jalen Graham had several good tackles yesterday, led the 49ers with 6. It seems to me that he's really processing the playbook well. Same thing with D. Winters. I mean, Winters already has a pick in practice, another near pick after that. He had a nice sideline stop, 3 tackles yesterday. Stock rising for both of these 49ers young linebackers. But the thing is that this is the really crowded position room. You go to that linebacker room right now, and you've got Warner, Greenlaw, Burks, McCrary Ball, Jalen Graham. McCrary Ball wasn't bad yesterday. Saw him miss 1 tackle in the backfield, but then made another nice stop. I think that you take 6 linebackers. And you do have enough of a surplus here to where a trade is possible. They trade Warren Burks, they save $2.5 million. Do they want to trade Oren Burks? I'm not sure. It depends on how these younger guys are coming along. But if McCrary Ball, Jalen Graham, and D. Winters all come along really strong before this cut down, you definitely can talk about it. Jonas Griffith style, right? The 49ers traded Jonas Griffith to the Broncos in 2021 because they had a surplus at linebacker. So even without Azeez Al-Shire, I think the 49ers still have a surplus at linebacker here. And that's a credit to Johnny Holland. It's a credit to the scouting department, the coaching staff, everybody for finding talent that continues to impress even in the later rounds. And as you'll notice, the latest projection here, I don't have Demetrius Flanagan-Foles making the roster because I just don't have room for him here. I mean, if Winters continues playing well and Graham continues playing well and McCrary Ball continue playing well, somebody's going to be on the outside looking in, and it might be DFF, Demetrius Flanagan-Foles. All right, let's move on to the secondary. I talked about Ambry Thomas in my article here. I actually had a great story about Ambry Thomas that I'll be happy to share with you now. You know, what I noticed is a lot of Michigan guys were at the center of what was going on for the 49ers. Obviously, we headline with Jake Moody here, Michigan man. Ambry Thomas, better outing than Jake Moody, Michigan man. And Ronnie Bell, Michigan man. He had a good outing as well. Of course, you know, I should have put Ronnie Bell's stock up in the receiver room. I don't have to go back to that. I've skipped receivers here. So let me get to that one in a second. Why don't you guys, while I work on that little text title, why don't you guys take a look at this roster? Let me know if there's anything else that you think is a little bit awry on the roster. But I'm going to put Ronnie Bell on this receiver room, you know, because I thought that Tay Martin's stock also went up for the 49ers yesterday. Tay Martin had a nice little game for San Francisco. So wide receiver, we're going to go Ronnie Bell, Tay Martin up. I wouldn't say, you know, we'll put Chris Conley up too. I think and Isaiah Winstead made a nice catch. Willie Snead had the play that was the reception on the play that Trey Lance was scrambling and it was nearing the line of scrimmage. So the receiver room was nice. I was talking about them. We'll talk about them in a second. We're going to go over to the DB room first since that's what we hit right now. Anyway, defensive backs for the 49ers. Ambry Thomas, and I talked about him. That's what I was going to get to. Talked about Ambry Thomas in this article alongside the Michigan men. Make sure you check it out because it is up in the description right now. $2 a month for the Athletics, so you could see it right now. Try to cover this debut for the 49ers as fairly as possible. Ambry had a story for me because I thought there was a great play last week where he muscled up against George Kittle, made a pass break up against the player who's 60 pounds heavier than him, and I said, "Oh wow, that's impressive. That's impressive." And it seems to me that Ambry Thomas has been muscling up against a lot of different opposing receivers ever since then. He missed one tackle in the backfield yesterday, early in the game, on Zamir White. It was on the touchdown. I thought that Ambry coming off the edge there, thought that he had a chance at Zamir in the backfield, couldn't quite get him. But later in the game, Ambry Thomas notched a tackle for loss. Kerry Hyder blew the play up, and then Ambry came in there against Zamir White again and fixed his mistake from earlier on. I thought that was huge. Then he had a nice pass breakup downfield, and he had nice, good third down coverage. So good game for Ambry Thomas, showcasing the physicality, and that's exactly where the 49ers have needed him to improve. That being said, we need to investigate where this improvement has come from. And I talked to Ambry in the locker room after the game, and he gave me this great nugget. Let me toss this onto the screen for everybody. Thomas said his success Sunday traces back to a play he made against star 49ers tight end George Kittle during OTAs. And here's what Ambry told me. Tay Martin and I got into it at practice. He had caught a 5-yard hitch. I pushed him. Then George Kittle came to protect him, and then we got into it. So then that next drive, Kittle ran a dig on me, and I broke it up. Ever since that moment from OTAs, I felt that something else sparked inside of me. So I thought that it was a play against George about a week ago, but apparently it goes all the way back to OTAs where Ambry Thomas got into George. George Kittle got into his face. They're in each other's faces, and it was Ambry who said, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to make sure that the very next snap, I shut George Kittle down. or the next drive. I'm going to shut George Kittle down. And he did. And again, George Kittle weighs 250 pounds. He's 6'4", 250. Ambry Thomas weighs about 190, maybe 190 dripping wet. And for Ambry Thomas to be able to get physical successfully against George Kittle, I think that's the kind of play that can give him confidence being physical against much smaller receivers. And that's what he has to be. And, it's so key for the 49ers because to illustrate what's going on here on their roster, they need to be deep at cornerback. 2021 taught us that if you don't have cornerback depth, you're screwed. 2020 taught us if you don't have cornerback depth, you're screwed. I mean, what was that guy's name? Brian. I forgot his name. Well, I forgot it was Brian something, right? I forgot his last name. Probably don't want to hear his last name because it was the game against Miami in 2020. COVID year, stadium's empty. And he was just completely abused on defense. It was bad. And that was a practice squad cornerback coming up for the 49ers. So you have to be stronger at cornerback 3, cornerback 4. Thought Samuel Womack got beaten a few times yesterday. But who didn't get really beaten yesterday was Ambry Thomas. And if he continues along this trajectory, Ambry Thomas is a clear 49ers cornerback number 3. And that would be really, really great news for this football team. I also have to say that A.J. Parker, his stock is rising. A.J. Parker, if you want to hear this story, this is a true dark horse kind of situation for the 49ers. A.J. Parker was with the Lions in 2021 and 2022. He's a 5'11", 185-pound nickelback. That body type tells you he's probably going to play on the inside. The Lions waived him. The 49ers signed A.J. Parker in the middle of January while they're on their playoff run last year, but they signed him to a futures contract. They didn't sign him to the 2022 team. They signed him to a contract for 2023 and beyond. That's how much they liked him, right? So they're already doing this scouting in mid-January. Yesterday, A.J. Parker had 14 snaps at slot cornerback, and the only catch he gave up was to Keelan Cole, who had previously beaten the starter, Isaiah Oliver, at nickelback for a touchdown. He stopped Keelan Cole for a 4-yard loss. But Parker was the 49ers' highest graded defensive back in coverage yesterday. And again, just look back to when they signed him. They signed him 8 months ago in the middle of January. They stashed him for the future. And let's pair this with Isaiah Oliver, who the 49ers signed as a free agent coming out of Atlanta. First off, it might have been noteworthy that Isaiah Oliver was the 49ers' only defensive starter to see action yesterday. So all the locks for the first team, those guys all sat. But Isaiah Oliver played, and he didn't play particularly well. He was beaten by Keelan Cole on the touchdown, right? We saw that. We also saw him miss a tackle a little bit earlier in the football game. And we know the background of Isaiah Oliver is one of a cornerback for the Atlanta Falcons who wasn't good at outside corner, so they had to move him to the slot. And he's much bigger than other potential options at nickelback. Deshaun Jamison is 5'9". A.J. Parker is 5'11". Isaiah Oliver is a little bit over 6 feet, and he's nearly 210 pounds. So the 49ers picked up Oliver to be a physical nickelback closer to the box, maybe a glorified linebacker of sorts, so you can combat these big slot alignments and so you could combat the run. I'm not so sure that they picked him up for his coverage skills, and you probably saw Exhibit A of that yesterday. So that it would make sense that they're serious about developing another nickelback behind Oliver who has better coverage skills, and maybe A.J. Parker is that guy. Maybe Ambry Thomas becomes that guy. Maybe you can mix and match some of the defensive backs that you have. Thomas on the outside, Diamond Lenore moves into the slot. I don't know how they're going to do things because they don't have K'Wan Williams anymore. They don't have Jimmy Ward anymore. This is a new world. One possibility is Jair Brown, who, I could say his stock was rising. I talked about Jair in the article, crashed down on that Zamir White stop. But if they're serious about running 3 safety sets, somebody's got to come off the field. And maybe that somebody's Isaiah Oliver. So you could run Jair Brown, you can run him with Talanoa Hufanga, and you can run him with Tashawn Gibson in the same formation. All of this is possible. All of this is worth keeping an eye on. And A.J. Parker, well, maybe we project him to the practice squad for now, but that was a good preseason start for A.J. Parker yesterday. They signed him in January. He shows up yesterday, and he's the 49ers' highest graded defensive back. All right, on to receivers, since this is a position that I skipped inadvertently as we were going through the offense. Ronnie Bell, 3 catches, 58 yards. The jet sweep yesterday was revelatory to me. He broke 2 tackles. So, if you could break tackles in the NFL, Kyle Shanahan's going to give you the football. If you can run good routes in the NFL, Kyle Shanahan's going to give you the football. He ran his best route on the play that he dropped and was intercepted. Even despite that big error from Ronnie Bell, there was a lot to like from him, not just yesterday, but in the 2 practices against the Raiders on Thursday and Friday. So this was Ronnie Bell's big party here. It was a big coming out party for Ronnie Bell. We had heard from him in OTAs. He was quieter throughout the first 2 weeks of training camp. Here in Vegas, everything went really, really well for Ronnie Bell, with the exception of that drop that turned into a pick. But we have to say his stock is up. Tay Martin, boy, I mean, he's going to be tough to cut if it comes to that for the 49ers. He's running good routes. He's holding on to the football. He wasn't able to get 2 feet in bounds there on the Brandon Allen throw. But Tay Martin's a player I think the 49ers would love to retain at least on their practice squad this year. And Chris Conley, the 30-year-old veteran, he's got a nice rapport with Trey Lance. He made a nice intermediate catch there from Lance on the 2-minute drill. I think there's a lot to like about Chris Conley. It's just going to be tough for the 49ers to hold on to all these players, right? Because you could take a look at my projection right here. Go to the receiver room. There it is, highlighted at the top. I mean, Isaiah Winstead, the rookie, made a catch. Martin, Conley, Snead, who are all on the outside looking into this projection, they all made catches. Ray McLeod is obviously hurt. They're going to have to carry him on the 53 before putting him on IR if they do want to put him on IR. So he's eligible this season. So they may be able to run a maneuver and fit one extra guy onto this football team. They could sign him after the McLeod IR designation, but it still is turning out to, in my opinion, to look like a little bit of a logjam at that wide receiver room. And Danny Gray is going to have to show out here over the next couple weeks of practice because there's pressure being put on by Martin, by Conley, by Willie Snead, to a lesser extent, Isaiah Winstead, who's the tallest receiver on this roster. So that's 49ers stock up, stock down. Hope everybody's doing well on Monday afternoon. Kyle Shanahan's going to speak at 2 p.m., so that's about an hour and a half. And then we're going to move on with our lives back to the Bay Area. That's important. Have to get back for practice tomorrow. And we're going to move on and start talking about the 49ers in training camp again, because that's going to resume, and the 49ers playing the Denver Broncos in week 2 of the preseason. Why don't we open this up to 49ers Q&A? Q&A. Let me get some stats here really fast. Let me reach over. Game book, notes. I'm going to go through some more notes from the game yesterday. Like I said, I came back home yesterday and I watched the tape at about midnight, was eating pizza, watching tape. And, a few things stood out to me. One, Brandon Allen, 2 thumbs up. Brandon Allen, I mean, you're talking about a floor for a quarterback. You want it to be higher for QB2. Brandon Allen showed that. Hung in the pocket, made some tough throws. He was accurate. There were 2 plays that probably should have been completions that weren't, when Ronnie Bell dropped the pass that turned into a pick and Tay Martin couldn't get 2 feet in bounds. I thought it was a really, really solid performance for Ronnie Bell. Jordan Willis for the Raiders, former 49er, he had a nice run stop there. I think it was on 4th down. Put that in my notes. I've talked about Latu. I've talked about Ronnie Bell. Talked about the fact that Sam Darnold looks like he has a much higher floor than Trey Lance right now. We saw one of those Steve Wilks blitzes from Taylor Hawkins, who was unable to bring down the quarterback, but that was a safety blitz. I thought it was well diagnosed. It just would have taken better execution from Taylor Hawkins to finish it up. But it should be a good idea, a good illustration of the increased amount of blitzes that Steve Wilks is going to call. That was a good example of one such play. Ty Davis-Price had a nice blitz pickup yesterday against the Raiders. Let's not forget about that. Took on a linebacker, allowed for a nice downfield throw from Sam Darnold. Jamison, I haven't talked enough about him. I think all 3 of his returns were called back due to penalty, but obviously the penalties weren't on him. Deshaun looked like he had some spark at returner. A lot of people are already saying they like him more than Ronnie Bell at returner. Let's let that audition continue into next week. Yep, Jair's tackle at the goal line was nice. I asked Jair about it, and he's like, I was so happy, man. This was in the locker room. He said he was so happy. It was the first chance he had to tackle somebody since the Rose Bowl. Penn State played in the Rose Bowl. That was 8 months ago. So it was good for Jair Brown to get out there. So here's Steve chiming in. The preseason means nothing. Well, I agree with it, Steve. It means nothing in terms of the scoreboard. I mean, the Raiders haven't lost a preseason game in years. They went they're 5-0 under Josh McDaniels now in preseason games. It's one of those situations where the final score is not indicative of team strength in the regular season, but we watch it through the lens that I'm talking about right now. You watch individual players, right? You watch individual players and you see, okay, whose stock is up, whose stock is down, how's that roster going to look? I will say a team that has as many superstars as the 49ers, and they're very top heavy, right? From Trent Williams to Christian McCaffrey to Brandon Ayuk to George Kittle to Nick Bosa. Those kinds of teams are less likely to look good in the preseason on the scoreboard because all those starters are usually sitting, especially in week one. So, yeah, people overreacting about this. I mean, to say that the 49ers don't look like a Super Bowl team after week one of the preseason, all you're doing is telling on yourself that you don't understand NFL football. That's all you're doing. Because, again, week one of the preseason, a loaded Super Bowl team that's not playing its players, of course, they're not going to look like a Super Bowl contender if those guys are in street clothes on the sideline. It's as simple as that. Plus, if you want to delve deeper into it, the fact that the team has a top-heavy roster is going to mean that there's going to be more, competition for those depth spots because those depth spots aren't filled by marquee names. As we know, the 49ers process involves re-signing A-listers, letting B-listers walk. So preseason games are going to look more like a practice competition because you're trying to fill in the margins with competitive depth. They're going to look more like that than an established football team. Yeah, Jake Moody did share insight into his kicks. That's obviously not the impression that he wants to give. He missed. He missed twice. He's going to watch the tape. He's going to try to fix it. It's happened before that a third-round pick has flamed out in the NFL, a kicker, Robert Aguayo, a few years ago. Is that a possibility with Jake Moody? Of course it is. I mean, I think the 49ers have actually braced themselves against the unlikely chance that Jake Moody ends up not being good at the NFL level, right? They still have Zane Gonzalez on the roster. That's the insurance plan. So kick back and wait for a bit. See what happens here. Give Jake Moody a chance to iron things out next week. If he doesn't, okay, start scratching your head. It might be a little bit concerning. But for that reason, Jake Moody is still on this football team. You just never know. People were laughing when the 49ers put Jake Moody or Zane Gonzalez on the depth chart. Well, even though Jake and Zane had both been good at practice, and because of that, people just assumed that Jake would be the guy and Zane would be traded. You have to wait until the lights come on in these games to make a proper evaluation. I have no Nick Bosa update for you right now. Status quo. There's still, I think the deadline at week one is the one that's the most likely to spur action, but the 49ers would love to get that done quicker. You think that Ambry's going to thrive under the new defensive coordinator? Well, yeah. I mean, the new defensive coordinator, Steve Wilkes, works personally with defensive backs, and I think that Ambry Thomas has made some big strides since OTAs. All right. Yeah, I mean, Samuel Womack can be at the nickelback position for the 49ers. That's definitely a possibility. I mean, he's got the short area quickness, but I think in a way, he's a little bit more of a burner than a short area guy. He's 5'9", so he's got the short area stuff, but he runs a 4.4. Now, yesterday, Sam Womack got beat by a 4.4 receiver, Trey Tucker, for the Raiders down the sideline. They ended up calling it incomplete, but he didn't have good leverage, and he lost that battle. So I think Womack, he's been all over the field this training camp, still needs some seasoning. He was a good special teams contributor as a rookie for the 49ers. I think that he makes the roster, but I also think that guys like Deshaun Jamison are climbing at a faster trajectory right now than Sam Womack. That being said, Womack probably higher on the pecking order than somebody like A.J. Parker right now, even though A.J. Parker seems to be climbing for the 49ers on the depth chart. Lance needs to find game rhythm. The last 35 seconds look good, with the exception of what should have been an interception. And it was only 28 seconds. So in Trey Lance's credit, he moved the 49ers into field goal range after the kick return in only 28 seconds. But the first play should have been picked and probably should have turned into points for the Raiders going the other way. Can't make those mistakes if you're Trey Lance, right? But then he found Conley on the intermediate. He found Fumagalli over the middle. Those were two nice plays on intermediate throws. So give Trey credit for those. He found some rhythm in the 2-minute drill, and I also thought that he found some rhythm before the 2-minute drill when he hit the gimmies. It is all about hitting the short passes in the system because, again, 2nd and 4 is a better spot to live than 2nd and 10. A lot of people didn't understand. A lot of people try to lash out at me when I said, Trey Lance is still missing short passes earlier this camp. He's still inconsistent with these passes. They're like, what does it matter? Well, it doesn't really matter in a scripted portion of camp where you're just running from the same down and distance over and over again. You miss one short pass, you move on to the next play. It's okay. In a game situation, it all falls apart like a house of cards if you can't hit Dwelly into the flat. And that's what happened on one of the drives yesterday. You miss Dwelly into the flat, all of a sudden you're facing 2nd or 3rd and long. 2nd and 3rd and long, defense pins its ears back. Your offensive line, which is a better run blocking offensive line than a pass blocking offensive line, is screwed. By extension, so is Trey Lance. So Trey Lance ends up hurting himself by missing the short throws because he puts his offensive line in a bad position with the defense pinning its ears back, and it all just kind of goes to hell, right? So he's got to be better at establishing rhythm. Kyle can scheme everything, but Lance has to execute it. And he just needs more time. He needs more development time. He's so inexperienced. But the 49ers can only give him so much because the ship has already sailed on the big developmental window. It's Brock Purdy's time now. So Lance has to, within the context of Brock Purdy's offense, which is pocket-styled production, it's not, zone read plays, Lance has to prove that he can raise the floor. And is it a catch-22? Yes. Is it a tough situation? Yes. But it's a dog-eat-dog world. That's how the NFL works. You get hurt for 2 straight years, they're going to look to move on from you. They're going to look at every single possibility to move on from you. It happened to Jimmy Garoppolo with the 49ers because he was getting hurt too much. And it's happened here with Trey Lance. And they found a good option in Brock Purdy, a better option than Trey Lance. So the reality of the situation is that it's different than it was in 2022 and 2021. It just absolutely is. And Lance is going to have to work under those parameters. It's going to have to be Purdy's offense, which is Shanahan's pocket-based offense, and it's going to have to be limited reps against the twos in the preseason. He had the full opportunity last year, and he got hurt. If that's not fair to you, well, life isn't fair. That's just how it works. This is the NFL. This is a man's league. You deal with it like a man. There's so much crying about this situation online. The 49ers are only operating according to what they have to do to best protect their business interests at every step of the way. And you best protect your business interest if you don't get sucked up in a sunk cost. It's Econ 101. You can't get sucked up in a sunk cost. And that's what Trey Lance is right now. It's a sunk cost, so you work with what you have on the roster moving forward. I mean, yeah, this is a good way to put it. He's a third-year QB with a first-year experience. But that's just the situation you're dealing with. That's the reality. It's too bad that it ended up like this. But you got to dig yourself out of the hole. You can't pretend that the hole doesn't exist. Is there any chance that Lance gets any preseason game time with the starters? That's a good question. That's a good question. I think maybe you give all three in the dress rehearsal game. It depends on if you think Brock Purdy needs a whole half, because normally the dress rehearsal game is going to be week 3 against the Chargers. Normally you give the starters a whole half. So do you think that Brock Purdy needs the full half of the starters, or do you want to give Trey Lance some time with the starters and Sam Darnold some time with the starters? Maybe a quarter for Purdy and then split the second quarter for the other two guys with the first team. I don't know if Kyle's going to want to do that. But again, if you believe Brock Purdy needs those reps, Brock Purdy deserves them over Trey Lance. Because Brock has delivered at the NFL level. Draft status only tells you so much. Draft status is a slight predictor of what's going to go on, but a much bigger predictor of what's going to happen moving forward is actual NFL playing time and experience. And Brock Purdy has delivered in that time. Trey Lance, for whatever reason, and I know the reasons are not his fault, these injuries, hasn't. But the 49ers have to deal with that reality. And if they think that Brock Purdy needs a full half of reps, that's more important than Trey Lance getting a quarter. It simply is. And I know the truth hurts. I know that people are going to be fanboys of one player or the other, but that's how the 49ers are operating. That's how the strategy works in this situation. Because the 49ers are trying to win a Super Bowl this year, right? If you're trying to win a Super Bowl, then Brock Purdy's your best chance at it. I think that's really clear at this moment. All right. It's been 49 minutes. Everybody take care. Sub to The Athletic, sub to the channel. We'll talk to everybody soon.